Let's talk about one of the great mysteries in the business world. Why do these giant, seemingly invincible companies so often just collapse? I mean, really think about that for a second. How can a company that is at the absolute top of its game, a company that literally invents the technology that defines the future, end up totally irrelevant? It's this crazy paradox that's baffled people for years. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and figure it out. So let's set the stage. We're talking about the titans, right? The household names that felt like they would be around forever. Now, the easy answer is to say, oh, well, they must have run out of money, or they couldn't hire good people, or they just stopped innovating. But the fascinating thing is, the research shows that's just plain wrong. They had all the money, all the talent, all the ideas they needed to win. I mean, get this, Kodak. They didn't just miss the boat on digital cameras, they invented the very first one, way back in 1975. And Nokia? Their research labs were playing with touchscreen phones years before the iPhone was even a whisper. They were literally holding the future in their hands. So what on earth went wrong? Well, the real reason wasn't a failure of invention. It was a failure of the organization itself, a deep, systemic breakdown in the company's own internal operating system. The heart of the problem is something researchers call the Siri practice gap, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's that huge chasm between knowing what you need to do and actually being able to do it. The leaders at Kodak knew digital was the future, but the company as a whole was just incapable of making the leap. So why couldn't they act? Because the whole company was a perfectly tuned machine for yesterday's business. Their policies, how they made decisions, their entire corporate structure. It was all designed to make film photography more efficient. So when a disruptive idea like a filmless camera came along, the system didn't see an opportunity, it saw a threat. And it basically starved that new idea of the resources it needed to survive. Okay, so if that's the disease, what's the cure? Well, it turns out there's a really powerful way to think about building companies that can actually thrive on change, not just survive it. It's a concept called dynamic capabilities. And don't let the fancy name scare you. This isn't about having the best resources today. It's about having the ability to change, to constantly tear down and rebuild parts of your company to keep up with a world that never sits still. It's about designing your company for evolution. And this whole idea breaks down into three pretty simple steps. First, you have sensing. You got to be constantly scanning the horizon, looking for what's coming next, both good and bad. Second, there's seizing. Once you spot an opportunity, you have to go after it hard. You mobilize your people, your money, everything you've got. And third, you have transforming. Honestly, this is the hardest part. You have to be willing to continuously reinvent your own company, even when it's successful, to stay ahead. All right, that all sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like in a real, messy, global company? Let's get practical. This leads us to a classic corporate tug-of-war. Do you centralize everything from the top down? You get consistency, sure, but you also get slow and bureaucratic. Or do you let everyone do their own thing? You might get innovation, but you also risk chaos. For decades, companies have been stuck between these two poles. But today, technology gives us a third option, a hybrid approach called a federated model. It's all about getting the best of both worlds. You use technology to centralize the really critical stuff, the rules, the security, the big picture strategy. But you give your teams on the ground the freedom to execute, to be fast and creative. And to make sure all this innovation is actually paying off, you have to measure it the right way. An Innovation Balanced Scorecard does just that. It goes way beyond just looking at R&D spending. It tracks the whole life cycle, what you're putting in, how fast you're moving, what you're actually producing. And it all leads to the most important metric, the outcome. A metric like return on portfolio development effort basically asks a simple question. For every dollar an hour we invested in new ideas, how much real value did we get back? It makes innovation accountable. And that brings us to our final point. And honestly, it might be the most critical mindset shift of all. It's about how companies need to think about planning for disaster. When most of us think about a contingency plan, we think about this, right? The power goes out, a server crashes, and the whole plan is about one thing: getting things back to normal, restoring the old system. But focusing only on fixing what's broken creates this massive blind spot. It's a dangerous mindset called the tactical trap. You get so good at putting out fires that you completely miss the fact that the entire building is about to be obsolete. And this is the difference in a nutshell. Tactical planning is reactive. It's about restoring the past. Strategic planning is proactive. It's about building the future. It treats obsolescence not as some shocking emergency, but as a completely inevitable, scheduled event. It's the difference between having a plan to fix your car when it breaks down versus having a plan to buy a new car every 5 years because you know the old one won't last forever. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on, whether it's for your company or even your own career. If the thing that makes you successful today were to become totally irrelevant tomorrow, is your entire plan based on trying to patch up the past? Or are you already busy building its replacement?